Hello, and welcome to Saving People Queering Things, a supernatural podcast. We were previously known as Driver Picks the Podcast, and the episode you're about to listen to was recorded under that name. Though our name has changed as of season 3, our show hasn't changed that much. Our structure and theme-based discussions are the same, and we're so glad you're here. Now, let's get on the road. Hello, and welcome to Driver Picks the Podcast, the show where we talk about ghosts, road trips, and free will through every episode of the TV series Supernatural. It is the confession anniversary day. We usually release our episodes on Mondays, but today, November 5th, 2021, is the anniversary of a very important episode from season 15 of Supernatural, and I couldn't help myself. I needed to create a little bonus content for y'all. If you've been around this fandom in the past year, you know how significant November 5th was, and how significant episode 18 of season 15 was. If you do not want spoilers for season 15, you will want to stop listening to this episode right now. If not, listen on. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what the Cass Confession episode meant to me, how we got here as a fandom, and a few of my favorite things, fanfics, videos, Tumblr posts, and fan creators related to the topic of Cass, of Destiel, all that good stuff. So first off, some brief context. Destiel, Angel of the Lord, pulled Dean from hell in 2008, rebelled against the divine plan in 2010, and for the next 10 years would be a crucial part of the Supernatural story, the third member of Team Free Will, and a constant in the Winchesters' lives, with a particularly profound bond with Dean Winchester. In season 15, episode 18, Cass's story on Supernatural came to an end when he sacrificed himself as a final rebellion against Chuck, but only after confessing his love for Dean as a moment of his truest happiness. Of course, we all know what happens afterwards, as episode 19 and 20 of season 15 ignored the confession, its aftermath, and its impact, and gave what is largely considered of a betrayal of a series finale by most of the fan base. However, I'm not here today to talk about the aftermath or the Supernatural finale. That's a topic for another episode. I'm here to talk about what the confession signified to me as a queer person, as someone whose formative young years were spent watching this show, and as someone who now, as an adult, is still grappling with the complex parasocial relationships that I have with these characters and with the show as a whole. After all, I created a whole podcast to rewatch this show while I'm a person in my late 20s with a career and limited free time. And this confession is honestly a huge part of why this podcast exists. As a queer person, for years I watched this show, despite its lack of explicit representation of queer people, exception being Charlie, but obviously we also have complex feelings about that. A huge reason I did watch the show for so many years, despite its lack of queer representation, was the deep connections that I've always felt with Dean in particular, but also with Destiel. Misha Collins has talked a number of times about how many autistic and queer fans have resonated with Cass, and that definitely rings true for myself. There's a fantastic meta-analysis of the Dean-Cass storyline throughout the 12 years that Cass was on the show in a video called The Evolution of Destiel, and I will talk about it a little later in my recommendation section, and it will be linked in the show notes. But one of the things the creator of that video talks about is the evolution within Supernatural from queer baiting to queer coding that happens with both Dean and Cass, and that started to happen around season 8. For years as fans, we wondered if Supernatural would ever follow through on the queer coding that they had been building into the show, whether intentional or unintentional. And so November 5th, the events of Cass's confession of love, his homosexual declaration of love, as is the exact phrase that has been used, November 5th was incredibly cathartic for queer fans of Supernatural for that reason. It had been the resolution of something we have been wanting for years and years. Despite the fact that Cass is immediately killed off after confessing his love and the multitude of problems that represents within media depictions of queer characters, despite that, the very fact that Supernatural went there explicitly after so many years was more than most of us queer fans thought we would ever get. We could go on about the bury your gaze trope, the incredible insensitivity about the finale in how it handled Cass by not including him, or the out of character lack of grief that we see from Dean in the final 2 episodes. But I want to focus more on the legacy of the confession and what that's meant to fans in general, but mostly what it's actually meant to me. From novel-length fix-it-fix to meta-analysis videos, from carefully worded questions at cons to the actors, to script releases months after the finale, Twitter trending topics, detailed looks at screen directions in scripts, this fan base has dug as deep as they can go to fight for this confession's legitimacy and for the legitimacy of the queer coding in the years that preceded it. We have fought for this relationship to be honored for what it represents in a show like Supernatural, where the goofy, hyper macho masculinity of the early seasons gave way to an often accidentally rich, nuanced depiction of trauma, gender, found family, free will, and queer identities, in the case of both Dean and Destiel, as well as other characters of the show, but most significantly those two. Obviously, Supernatural deserves the criticism it gets, particularly for its finale. But I think it's worth noting that a fan base that is largely queer has reclaimed a story where we were often told we were imagining things. And because of the power of that fan base and the creations that they've made and the analysis that they've done, we have effectively canonized a queer relationship into popular culture. As the video that I talked about earlier, and we'll talk about again, points out, the fact that Destiel will always be associated with Supernatural is because of this fan base, and largely because of its queer fans. This is powerful, and it's a huge reason this podcast exists, because for me, my own personal development of identity, gender, and sexuality happened simultaneously to the years that I spent overanalyzing, writing about, and developing a very parasocial relationship with characters in this show. For over a year and a half in 2013 and 2014, I co-wrote a roleplay fic based on the relationship between Dean and Cass in the Enverse universe of season 5. I dressed as alternating Dean and Cass cosplays for multiple Halloweens and fan events. In college, I amassed a huge Tumblr community that hyper-analyzed minute details of the story and show, and I made some of my best friends through those Tumblr blogs. And although I rage quit the show in season 9 due to the writing choices, mainly related to Dean's relationship with Cass and also with Sam, I came back to the show in season 15, mainly because I couldn't not be a part of watching a show conclude when it had been such a significant impact on my developing years. And I'm so glad I did, because I honestly love the last 5 seasons of Supernatural quite a lot if you leave out the last 2 episodes. For better or for worse, Supernatural, and Destiel in particular, is significant to me and to a lot of fans. And so as I've developed this podcast and we've chosen to treat Supernatural as a kind of sacred text in film form, we've been trying to give it the attention and care that allows for us to glean good from it, regardless of the creator's intent. We've been able to write our own story and write our interpretation onto it and pull from the canon of the show in ways that have been incredibly meaningful to me, to many of my close friends, and I know to the whole Supernatural community. I'm incredibly grateful for that, and that's why this project exists. Now, I want to move on to some recommendations. What I really love about this fandom, particularly in the last year since the show ended, is the ability of creators to reclaim and rewrite the narrative, particularly surrounding Dean and Cass, and particularly surrounding that ever so shitty finale. So these are some of my favorite Destiel creators and creations. All of these recommendations will be linked in the show notes. This is not an exhaustive list. If you want more recommendations, I definitely have them. Please come find me on social media and talk to me about them. The first category of my recommendations are fan edit videos. So first up is the Crazy Ex Supernatural video series. This is a series that takes songs from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and overlays them on these incredible fan edits of Supernatural footage. There are a lot of Destiel specific ones, and they're all hilarious, and some of them are really meaningful and also kind of sad. I would highly recommend them. These are by Kate Bush Stan Dean on YouTube. Of particular note for this Destiel themed episode is the video After Everything You Made Me Do That You Didn't Ask For. Gratuitous karaoke moment. The group mind has decided you're in love, and it was a shit show. Next up, we have Dean and Castiel, Willow by Hannah's Side Gig. This is a incredible video to the Taylor Swift song Willow. It's just gorgeously edited, and it's a more recent video, so it includes footage from the last season of Supernatural, which I really appreciate. Next up is American Pie, the Supernatural Story by Chocolate Cake Cass. This is just an incredible representation of the whole show to a song that is incredibly, incredibly poignant when you think about the show as a whole. It's not Destiel specific, but they don't shy away from the relationship between Dean and Cass in this video, and I really appreciated that. Next up is No Light, No Light, Destiel Supernatural by Sidecar ER. This is an old favorite of mine from years ago. It's a gorgeous video. And lastly, Dean and Castiel Explosions by 00 Shelly 77. Again, just a classic. This song works so well for them. There's so much really good symbolism, and it's represented beautifully visually. If you like fan edit videos, if you've never seen fan edit videos, these are my recommendations. So next up, we have meta/analysis. These are some creators that do incredible work around the meta and analysis of the show from the Destiel perspective. First off, that video that I was talking about earlier, it's called The Evolution of Destiel, a video essay by Media Buzzkill. They have 2 video essays on Supernatural. They are both incredible. This Destiel one walks through the entire 12 years of the show, the different eras and different showrunners, and really pills out what was happening with Destiel in each of them and how it evolved over the years. It's one of the best pieces of analysis I've ever seen. And because it's a video essay, it really is able to visually kind of back up what it's saying. Next up is the Supernatural Scenes That Hit Different Now That Destiel is Canon series by the YouTuber Lampstiel. This is a series of 8 videos that work from season 4 all the way to season 15, basically pulling out scenes without commentary that are really interesting to look at in the retrospect now that we've had the confession. This is just a really great set of videos if you need to prove to someone that there's some canonical, backing for Destiel. Also, they're just very fun videos and very, very thorough. Next up, for more of a funny video, we have Dean Being Overtly Heterosexual for 17 Minutes by Sonia Joyi. This is a collection of clips and analysis around Dean and his relationship with sexuality, particularly his relationship with men. And it's just a great, again, if you need evidence of by Dean, this is your place to go. Finally, I have 2 Instagram accounts. These are not the writers of all of the meta on their accounts, but they repost a ton. And what I've really appreciated is their collections of posts from places like Tumblr and Twitter, doing analysis of different parts of the show. They both have a strong Destiel focus, and those 2 accounts are called Proud Heller and Zephyr Aria. And again, with all of these recommendations, they will be linked in the show notes. My last category of recommendations is fanfics. This is going to be the biggest category. I have a whole bunch of recommendations here. This, I think, is one of the coolest ways that Supernatural fans have reclaimed the show, is by writing fix-it fics, alternate universe fics. This has also just made Supernatural a super fun sandbox. If you didn't already know, the Dean Cass pairing on Archive of Our Own, which is the biggest fanfic site, was the first pairing to reach 100,000 fics just a few months ago. Archive of Our Own is huge, so, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of not so good, but I wanted to recommend some of my favorites. I will note that many of these fics do contain adult material. Some of it is canon-typical adult material, some of it is not canon-typical adult material. So I'm not going to talk through this through tags for each fic that I recommend, but I am going to recommend that you look at the tags on Archive of Our Own before you read them, because I won't be trigger tagging them. For this fanfic recommendation section, I am just going to read the Archive of Our Own description of each fic, and then I might make a couple comments on why I particularly love those ones. So first up is Psalm 40, verse 2 by Unicorn Poe, and the summary is basically Dean meets an angel who says he's from the future. It all gets a lot more complicated from there. This time travel, time bending fic is just really incredible. It's super well characterized. It is post episode 18 of season 15. It is a fix-it fic. The author one of the tags on this fic is "This is my gay Dean manifesto: the inherent queerness of wanting what you think you can't have." And that is a perfect representation of what this fic does. It's gorgeous. Next is In Due Time, Dean Winchester is Saved by Calum Wrights. And the summary of this one is a 26-year-old Dean is transported to 2021 and confronted with the unfathomable, a future where he is happy, safe, and loved. Again, another time travel fic. This one brings pre-season 1 Dean into 2021. This one features married Cass and Dean. It's post-finale. It's really, really lovely. There's also some Eileen and Sam in the background, which is just gorgeous. I think what's really strong about this fic is its characterization of pre-season 1 Dean and the comparison with him and his later self. Also the interactions of younger Dean with older Dean, just chef's kiss. Very good. Next, I'm going to talk about fics that are sports AUs. So first off is Repair Our Losses and Be a Blessing by Blowfish Diaries. This is a Destiel baseball AU. It's great. The manager of the team is Bobby Singer. Sam and Dean are both baseball players. Cass joins their team. It's great. Cass is a doctor. I learned a few things about baseball. And the characterization of Sam and Dean and their relationship as brothers is really, really good, especially as it interacts with the Dean and Cass stuff. And the other sports AU is For All You Young Hockey Players Out There, Pay Attention by Thursday's Fallen Angel. This was the first sports AU I read, and it is really, really lovely. I am Canadian. I grew up around a lot of hockey. It's the one sport I actually know stuff about. This fic's really well done in that. But this fic is just so good. Everyone in it is super well characterized. There's a really interesting coming out arc. There is fantastic exploration of John Winchester's A+ parenting. Dean and Cass are teammates. Cass is new to the team. They don't get along at first, kind of enemies to lovers. It's very, very good. It's also Jessica Moore, Sam Winchester. It's great. Charlie's in it. All around, solid fic. Next is Myself Is Just Me, Please Get Me the Fuck Out by Zeke21. This one is after a hunt goes wrong, Dean, Sam, and Cass are trapped within Dean's memories, and the only way out is somewhere between the layers of Dean's past, and both the spell and Dean are trying their hardest to keep them out. So Sam and Cass have to work their way through Dean's memories. They interact with a number of different versions of Dean within his memories. It's a really interesting writing in terms of how they've conceptualized the inside of someone's mind. That's super fascinating, and then it's just really, really well characterized. It's also very much a, making Dean work through his trauma thing, and making Dean work through his emotionally repressed queerness, and it's lovely. It's very good. Next is a kind of classic in the fandom. I know this one is super, super popular. It's called 91 Whiskey by Komodo Bits. It's a war AU set in 1944. And it's very much enemies to lovers. There's a lot of military stuff in this one. I definitely did some skimming, and this one I know is a polarizing even among Destiel fans. But its characterization is really lovely. And I did thoroughly enjoy it. It's also super long, so if you're looking for like a long, slow burn, it's definitely a way to go. So I have 2 more recommendations, and one of them is Omegaverse. Was I going to talk about Supernatural and fanfics without talking about Omegaverse? Omegaverse, I know, super hit or miss for fans. And usually, honestly, wasn't my thing before this fic. And this fic is actually an in-progress fic still. It's called Maybe Sprout Wings by Casually Neurotic. It is a trauma recovery fic. It is very heavy, I will say that. The cast in it is really just fantastic. He's my favorite. And the world that this author has kind of built, the way they've characterized the Omegaverse, and what they've done with that has been really, really good. And I really appreciate its way it's dealing with the significant traumas of its characters in really respectful and consensual ways. The last recommendation I have is a lot lighter. It's called A Different Lover Is Not a Sin, and it is just a short little fic about 5 times Dean doesn't go to Pride and 1 time he does go to Pride. It's just very sweet. It ends really happy. A lot of these fics most of these fics end happy but are sad along the way. This one is like less sad and ends really happy and really fluffy. So if you're looking for fluff, it's a good one. And that's all I have for recommendations. This episode's gotten a lot longer than I expected for a mini episode. All on my own. Apparently I have a lot to say about Destiel. If you have any recommendations for crucial Destiel content that I have missed, send me a message on Twitter at DPTPshow or at TikTok at DriverPicksThePod. Thank you for joining me today for this very special bonus episode. If you are following us through season 1, we will be releasing episode 21, Salvation, on Monday and talking about it through the theme of memories. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and comment to tell us what you like about the show or anything you think we should talk about. Thank you for joining me today, and as always, we wish you a peaceful road until we meet again. A note to our listeners. This episode was recorded prior to our Season 3 name change, where we went from Driver Picks the Podcast to Saving People, Queering Things. For all of our new social media platforms, visit queeringthingspodcast.com.